The night sky over Stalingrad was shattered by flashes of fire and the echo of distant artillery. Soldiers crouched in ruined buildings, mud caked to their boots, hearts hammering with each deafening explosion. Smoke rose like ghostly towers, masking friends and foes alike. In those streets, survival was measured in minutes. Each breath, each step a calculated risk. Yet, in the midst of ruin, small acts of bravery persisted. A soldier sharing bread, a medic rushing through rubble to tend the wounded, a teenager carrying messages between units. The city itself had become a test of endurance, its people and soldiers intertwined in a desperate struggle that would define the Eastern Front. Across the Pacific, island-hopping campaigns turned coral reefs into makeshift battlegrounds. Marines waded through surf, carrying equipment heavier than their own bodies, hearts pounding against the rhythm of distant gunfire. The heat pressed down, relentless, as sand burned their feet and the smell of salt mixed with smoke. Hidden Japanese bunkers required patience and cunning. Every step forward was a negotiation with death itself. Yet victories were measured not just in territory, but in survival, courage, and the ingenuity of small units adapting to impossible conditions. Maps and orders were guides, but intuition and grit often made the difference between life and death. In London, the city's children became masters of adaptation. They learned to walk through streets lined with rubble without fear, to identify the pattern of air raid sirens, and to find comfort in the tight quarters of underground shelters. Shops were makeshift, food was rationed, yet neighbors shared quietly, laughter echoing in dimly lit basements. Teachers continued lessons amid the chaos, instilling knowledge and a sense of normalcy in students whose world had been turned upside down. Life moved forward, step by cautious step, proving that resilience was built as much in ordinary moments as in extraordinary heroism. Across the deserts of North Africa, sandstorms became enemies as formidable as the opposing army. Tanks churned dunes into dust clouds, artillery fire rattled nerves, and officers measured every maneuver against the unforgiving terrain. Soldiers learned to read the landscape, how the sun marked direction, how heat distorted perception, how supply lines determined survival. Strategy was forged not only in maps and orders, but in understanding the subtle signs of the desert. Every mile gained was a triumph of endurance, every battle a lesson in the cruel arithmetic of war. In the Pacific jungles, survival meant learning to see and listen in a world that hid threats in every shadow. Patrols moved silently, communicating with gestures instead of voices. Disease and hunger were as deadly as gunfire. Soldiers relied on local guides, improvised traps, and their own instincts to navigate the dense undergrowth. Each day was a lesson in patience, observation, and cooperation. In this unforgiving environment, the human spirit revealed itself in quiet acts, sharing a canteen of water, tending to a wounded comrade, whispering encouragement when hope seemed distant. In occupied France, resistance fighters moved like ghosts through villages, carrying messages, sabotaging railways, and guiding Allied agents through secret routes. Every mission carried the risk of capture, torture, or death. Yet ordinary people, bakers, farmers, teachers, joined in subtle ways, hiding weapons under hay, alerting neighbors of patrols, or providing false papers. Courage was measured in discretion as much as action, and the war's quiet victories often came in the form of small triumphs. A train derailed, a convoy delayed, a life quietly saved. On the Eastern Front, winter deepened the suffering. Snow clogged rifles, frost-bitten hands refused to grip, and supply wagons sank into ice. Soldiers wrapped themselves in tattered coats, eyes scanning for movement through the white wasteland. Survival depended on ingenuity, melting snow for water, patching boots, rationing every morsel of food. In these extreme conditions, Ordinary acts became heroic. A comrade shielding another from exposure, a medic improvising with limited supplies, a small unit holding a strategic position despite overwhelming odds. Humanity endured even as nature and war conspired against it. In the skies over Europe, bomber crews felt the weight of every decision. Clouds obscured targets, anti-aircraft fire whistled past, and engines groaned under strain. Each flight required precision and courage, every maneuver potentially fatal. Yet crews bonded through shared fear and mutual trust, relying on teamwork honed through countless sorties. Success was fleeting, measured in the survival of comrades and the completion of objectives. The war above the clouds became a crucible of discipline, innovation, and human resolve, shaping the skills that would later drive post-war aviation and technology. Back in London and other cities under siege, ordinary citizens contributed to the war effort in ways both visible and invisible. Women managed factories, producing weapons and equipment with mechanical precision. Children collected scrap metal, old newspapers, and fat for explosives. Neighbors shared food and shelter, creating networks of survival that mirrored military coordination on a civilian scale. Every effort, no matter how small, mattered. The home front became a battlefield of endurance, resilience, and quiet heroism, proving that the strength of a nation often lay in its ordinary people. Across the Pacific Islands, local communities endured occupation and bombardment with dignity and courage. Villagers hid neighbors from invaders, transported messages through dense forests, and found creative ways to sustain agriculture and trade amid destruction. The war was not only fought by armies but also by the ingenuity of civilians navigating impossible circumstances. Each hidden garden, each secret path, each whispered warning became a testament to human adaptability and courage, linking ordinary lives to the broader sweep of history. In the frozen steppes of Russia, soldiers trudged through snowdrifts taller than themselves, rifles weighed down by ice and frost. Each breath hung in the air like smoke as frost-bitten fingers clutched weapons. Supply lines were perilously thin. Food and ammunition became more valuable than gold. Yet amidst the bitter cold, moments of humanity persisted. A shared piece of bread, a whispered joke, a comrade helping another through exhaustion. The harshness of winter made endurance heroic, and the silent courage of these men shaped the outcome of battles that would decide the fate of nations. Over the Mediterranean, naval convoys moved under the constant threat of submarines. Merchant ships carried food, fuel, and soldiers, navigating waters that seemed deceptively calm. Every shadow on the horizon could be a torpedo. Every signal intercepted could mean disaster. Sailors spent endless hours on watch, eyes scanning waves, ears straining for unusual sounds. Success depended on coordination, vigilance, and the ability to act instantly under pressure. Each convoy that reached port alive was a small triumph against the unseen dangers of war. In the jungles of Burma, Allied and local troops navigated rivers and thick undergrowth, relying on maps, compasses, and the knowledge of indigenous guides. Malaria, leeches, and hidden enemy positions made every day a test of patience and skill. Supply lines were treacherous. Communication depended on runners and signals. Soldiers learned to move silently, trust instincts, and improvise solutions. Each small success, an ambush, a rescued comrade, a secured village, became a lifeline for broader campaigns. In these remote and grueling environments, courage and ingenuity were inseparable. In cities under occupation, the bravery of civilians often went unnoticed by history. Teachers hid children from patrols, bakers hid messages in bread, and families sheltered resistance fighters at great personal risk. Every act of defiance carried weight. A single mistake could mean execution. Yet ordinary citizens adapted, finding subtle ways to resist, communicate, and survive. Their courage was quiet, but profound. proving that heroism was not confined to the battlefield. In kitchens, basements, and alleyways, the war was fought with ingenuity, courage, and determination. High above Europe, fighter pilots engaged in deadly duels that lasted mere seconds but carried life-or-death consequences. Split-second decisions to pull up, dive, or fire. Determined survival, exhaustion, fear, and the roar of engines tested nerves and skill alike. Yet pilots relied on teamwork, training, and trust in their comrades. Each successful mission required a combination of instinct, discipline, and luck. The aerial battles of WW2 were not only about dominance in the skies, but also about pushing human endurance and innovation to the limit. In North Africa, soldiers adapted to a relentless sun and shifting sands. Camouflage, water rationing, and desert navigation became essential skills. Tanks and artillery forged paths through dunes, but miscalculations could lead to disaster. Soldiers learned to read the desert, the way shadows fell, the pattern of dunes, and the scent of distant fires. Success required both strategy and intimate knowledge of the land. Victory in the desert was never guaranteed. It was earned through observation, skill, and perseverance. In occupied territories across Europe, underground networks coordinated intelligence, sabotage, and escape routes. Couriers risked execution carrying messages through enemy checkpoints. Families hid operatives in attics and cellars, sharing food and supplies at great personal danger. Resistance work required ingenuity, secrecy, and courage. Small acts, a sabotaged train track, a falsified document, a secret signal, had outsized impact, demonstrating how ordinary people could shape the course of war in ways invisible to the broader world. On the Pacific Islands, island-hopping campaigns demanded precise coordination. Soldiers moved across reefs, beaches, and jungles, often under constant enemy fire. Engineers built makeshift airstrips and bridges from local materials. Supply lines were improvised, and medical teams worked under extreme conditions. Success depended on adaptability, problem-solving, and teamwork. Each captured island became a stepping stone toward larger strategic goals, showing how logistics, innovation, and determination were as vital as combat itself. In London, nights were punctuated by the wail of air raid sirens. Families crowded into shelters, clinging to whatever comforts they could find. Children learned to sleep through explosions, to read by candlelight, and to find play amid adversity. Community networks shared food, blankets, and news, sustaining morale even as bombs fell. Resilience became an everyday act, teaching that courage was not only found in soldiers, but also in those who kept life moving on the home front. The human stories of WW2s were not confined to grand battles. They unfolded in quiet moments as well. A nurse tending a wounded soldier in a field hospital, a mechanic repairing a plane under fire, a farmer hiding refugees behind haystacks, all contributed to the war effort in ways both profound and uncelebrated. These acts of perseverance, creativity, and courage collectively shaped outcomes, proving that the war was not only fought with guns and tanks, but also with ingenuity, resilience, and the unyielding human spirit. In the dim glow of a London basement, mathematicians and engineers worked in secrecy, assembling machines that could crack enemy codes. Each gear, wire, and calculation mattered. Mistakes could cost lives. The tension was palpable, but so was the sense of purpose. Operators and technicians, many young women, learned to navigate complex logic, punch cards, and ciphers, their skills quietly turning the tide of battles thousands of miles away. The codebreakers' work proved that intelligence and ingenuity could be as decisive as firepower. Across Europe, spies moved in shadows, blending into cities, trains, and cafes. Their identities concealed behind forged papers and whispered lies. They carried information that could save thousands or doom armies. Every decision demanded courage and calculation. A slip could mean capture or death. These unseen actors, often overlooked in grand histories, shaped outcomes with intelligence, sabotage, and subtle influence. Their heroism was silent but vital, a testament to the power of brains over brawn. In laboratories, chemists and engineers refined explosives, fuels, and synthetic materials. What had been conceived for destruction would later transform civilian life. Nylon, first developed for parachutes, became a household fabric. Plastics, produced for machinery and packaging, revolutionized industry. Jet engines, honed in combat, would one day carry passengers across continents. Every wartime innovation had a story, bridging destruction and the promise of modern life, showing how necessity fueled creativity. On the home front, ordinary people became extraordinary through perseverance. Women stepped into factories, producing aircraft, tanks, and munitions with speed and precision that rivaled military discipline. Children collected scrap metal and rubber, while neighbors shared what little food they had. Communities organized themselves like miniature armies of efficiency and compassion, demonstrating that resilience, courage, and ingenuity were not limited to battlefields. The war effort was as much about coordination, creativity, and commitment at home as it was about combat abroad. In the skies, reconnaissance planes captured intelligence that would decide the course of battles. Pilots flew low over enemy territory, mapping troop positions, railways, and supply depots, risking flak and fighter attacks with every sortie. The data they gathered, often under extreme pressure, guided generals' decisions and saved countless lives. Observation and analysis became weapons in themselves, proving that knowledge could be as deadly as artillery. In occupied towns, resistance fighters carried out daring acts with limited resources, sabotaging trains, derailing supply lines, and transmitting intelligence across enemy lines demanded creativity and courage. Farmers hid weapons under haystacks, shopkeepers hid messages in loaves of bread, and ordinary citizens risked their lives daily. Each small act of defiance was a thread in a larger tapestry of resistance, showing that ordinary people could influence the war in ways both subtle and profound. On remote islands, engineers and medics improvised solutions with what little they had. Airstrips were carved from coral, hospitals built in tents, and supply chains improvised from local resources. Soldiers learned to adapt, innovate, and collaborate in harsh conditions. Each small victory, a repaired radio, a bridge completed, a wounded soldier saved, contributed to broader campaigns, proving that ingenuity and perseverance were as decisive as force. In the Arctic, convoys braved icy waters to deliver vital supplies. Sailors endured freezing temperatures, treacherous seas, and the constant threat of enemy submarines. Each successful voyage required skill, coordination, and courage, with crews relying on navigation, teamwork, and sheer endurance. The survival of these convoys was a lifeline, connecting distant fronts and sustaining the war effort, showing that heroism often existed in the quiet, relentless work of ordinary people. Medical teams on all fronts advanced techniques that would transform healthcare for generations. Field hospitals became centers of innovation, where amputations, trauma care, and infection management were refined under extreme conditions. Prosthetics evolved, allowing soldiers to regain mobility. Antibiotics, mass-produced for combat, became available for civilians, saving countless lives. The war accelerated medicine, proving that necessity drives invention and that human ingenuity thrives even amid suffering. From codebreakers to civilians, pilots to medics, the stories of WWs were as diverse as they were profound. Each individual, in their own way, shaped outcomes with courage, skill, and determination. The war's legacy was not only in the maps redrawn or battles won, but in the knowledge, resilience, and creativity that emerged from extraordinary circumstances. These lessons would ripple into the post-war world, influencing technology, culture, politics, and human imagination for decades to come. In the jungles of Southeast Asia, local guides and allied soldiers forged bonds that would shape the region long after the fighting ended. Knowledge of the terrain, rivers, and hidden trails became a lifeline, allowing missions to succeed where maps failed. Villagers hid soldiers from patrols, carried supplies through monsoon rains, and shared intelligence at great personal risk. The war in these remote regions was as much about human relationships and trust as it was about strategy, showing that courage often came in the form of quiet, persistent action. On the Indian subcontinent, millions of troops mobilized under British command, traveling to deserts, mountains, and islands far from home. Soldiers endured harsh climates, unfamiliar terrain, and grueling campaigns, yet their efforts were vital to Allied operations across multiple theaters. Despite facing discrimination and limited recognition, they demonstrated extraordinary skill, bravery, and resilience. Their stories of long marches, decisive battles, and survival against the odds shaped both the war and the post-colonial identities of the nations they would return to. In laboratories across Europe and the United States, wartime innovation laid the foundation for post-war technology. Radar, once used to detect enemy aircraft, became essential in air traffic control. Jet engines, born from the urgency of aerial combat, revolutionized commercial aviation. Computers, initially designed to break codes, evolved into machines capable of business, research, and eventually space exploration. Every advancement carried the DNA of wartime problem-solving, showing that ingenuity thrives under pressure, and that necessity is the mother of invention. In the skies above Europe, reconnaissance and precision bombing missions transformed both warfare and post-war aviation. Pilots and navigators pushed the limits of endurance and skill, navigating clouds, enemy fire, and complex terrain. Their work informed the design of modern navigation systems, commercial flight paths, and even meteorology. The lessons learned in these dangerous sorties shaped industries, technology, and human understanding of the skies for generations to come. On the home front, ordinary civilians carried forward the organizational and technical skills they had honed during wartime. Factories transitioned from producing tanks and munitions to appliances, automobiles, and electronics. Engineers and mechanics applied their knowledge to civilian industries, fueling economic recovery and modernization. Women who had filled critical roles during the war continued to shape workplaces and social structures, influencing gender norms and professional opportunities for decades. In North Africa and the Middle East, wartime logistics taught lessons that transformed post-war infrastructure. Roads, bridges, and ports built for campaigns became the arteries of commerce and trade. Communities that had supported armies learned to manage supply chains, irrigation, and communication networks. Local knowledge, once a tool of survival and strategy, became a foundation for rebuilding economies and fostering regional development. The war's impact extended far beyond battlefields, influencing growth and modernization in unexpected ways. Resistance fighters in occupied Europe, WW2 front, whose acts of courage had saved lives and disrupted enemy plans, now influenced post-war society. Their networks of trust and communication evolved into civic organizations, intelligence agencies, and social movements. The skills developed under occupation, discretion, strategy, and collaboration were repurposed to rebuild communities, support survivors, and shape political institutions. Quiet heroism had lasting consequences, proving that courage can ripple across decades. In Japan, engineers and scientists who had worked on military projects transitioned to civilian innovation. Rocketry, initially developed for weapons, became a cornerstone of satellite and space exploration. Nuclear research, while born in destruction, was redirected toward energy, medicine, and industry. Cities rebuilt from rubble became laboratories for urban planning, technology integration, and cultural preservation. The post-war era was a testament to human adaptability, turning tools of destruction into instruments of progress. Culturally, the war left deep imprints on art, literature, and music. Survivors documented trauma, resilience, and moral complexity in novels, memoirs, and films. Jazz, swing, and classical music carried influences across continents, blending styles that had been suppressed or transformed during occupation. Communities celebrated small victories in art, theater, and public gatherings, creating a shared memory that bridged generations. The cultural legacy of WW2 was as vital to human development as the political and technological changes it inspired. Even the smallest daily objects reflected wartime innovation. Synthetic fabrics, plastics, improved metals, and mechanized tools, all first developed for military use, became part of civilian life. Clothing, vehicles, household appliances, and medical equipment carried the imprint of necessity-driven creativity. The ordinary world was subtly transformed by extraordinary circumstances, demonstrating that human ingenuity often emerges from adversity, and that the echoes of war shape life in ways both visible and invisible. Decades after the last gunfire, the world still carried the fingerprints of WW2. Cities rebuilt from rubble bustled with commerce, culture, and innovation, their streets echoing the lessons of endurance and ingenuity. The technology born in wartime laboratories, computers, radar, jet engines, synthetic materials, had transformed daily life, powering everything from communication networks to air travel, medicine to energy systems. Ordinary people, who once rationed food, hid neighbors, or labored in factories under immense pressure, became architects of a modern world they had helped shape without fanfare. In schools across continents, students learned not just about battles and treaties, but about resilience, adaptation, and the consequences of human decisions. Teachers, many of whom had survived air raids or long marches, instilled lessons of critical thinking and responsibility alongside history. Generations inherited a world shaped by the courage, intelligence, and innovation of those who had endured unimaginable hardship, ensuring that the past informed the future in practical and moral ways. Globally, nations rebuilt and redefined themselves. Diplomacy, international organizations, and trade networks grew out of the need to prevent another conflict on such a scale. Borders shifted, empires dissolved, and new nations emerged, each carrying the legacy of sacrifice, struggle, and resilience. Former soldiers, engineers, nurses, and ordinary civilians brought their wartime skills to peacetime challenges, fostering progress in infrastructure, medicine, technology, and culture. The world had been remade not only through treaties and reconstruction, but through the cumulative effort of millions of lives shaped by extraordinary circumstances. Even in the quietest corners of the globe, the war's legacy persisted. Families told stories of survival, resistance, and courage. Communities carried forward lessons in organization, resourcefulness, and cooperation. The innovations once designed for combat, from prosthetics to antibiotics, synthetic fibers to navigation systems, improved civilian life, health, and mobility. The war had sparked a cascade of transformation that touched every aspect of human existence, showing that conflict, while destructive, could also accelerate knowledge, ingenuity, and societal evolution. The day after the war was not a single moment, but a continuum, a world shaped by adaptation, endurance, and creativity. Every technological breakthrough, cultural shift, and social reform carried echoes of those who had faced unimaginable adversity. From bustling cities to remote villages, from classrooms to laboratories, the influence of WW2 was everywhere. Subtle, profound, and enduring. Humanity had faced its darkest hours and emerged with tools, knowledge, and wisdom to navigate the modern era. History, once measured in battles and casualties, now included the ordinary and extraordinary contributions of millions. The war had tested the limits of endurance, courage, and creativity, leaving a legacy far beyond the battlefield. It had reshaped technology, culture, politics, and human consciousness, laying the foundations for the modern world. In the quiet hum of daily life, in the glow of a computer screen, in the wings of an airplane, in the pages of a book, the story of WW2 continued, not as a tale of destruction alone, but as a testament to human resilience, ingenuity, and the enduring capacity to rebuild and innovate. The war ended, but its echoes shaped every heartbeat of the modern world, a reminder that even amid devastation, humanity's ability to endure, adapt, and create could redefine the future. From the small acts of courage in hidden streets to the grand achievements of science and diplomacy, WW2 left a legacy that continues to guide, inspire, and teach, proving that the past, however dark, can illuminate the path forward.